Prince William may have stopped arguing with Harry because he has already decided the outcome. It is a chilling realization for those who have followed this fraternal saga, but the evidence mounting this spring suggests that the Prince of Wales has moved beyond the stage of anger and into a far more dangerous phase of indifference. We are witnessing the dawn of what many are calling his no-nonsense era, where the future king's focus has sharpened into a singular, unwavering priority: the protection of the monarchy from any further internal upheaval. There is a distinct sense within the higher echelons of the firm that the emotional bridges have not just been burnt, but the very ground they stood upon has been salted. For Harry, who seems to still be operating under the delusion that he is a brother to be rescued, the reality is far more clinical. He is now simply a problem to be contained. This transition from an emotional sibling rivalry to a cold institutional exclusion is the defining characteristic of William's leadership style as he prepares for the heavy weight of the crown. The atmosphere within the palace is currently one of quiet, determined finality, as if a collective breath has been held for years and is finally being exhaled in the form of a definitive, cold rejection. A source within the inner circle suggests that while the Duke of Sussex remains fixated on perceived slights from years past, such as the bafflingly petty arguments over Easter traditions, William's frustration has hardened into a wall of silence that no olive branch can penetrate. This isn't merely about gift-giving. It's about a fundamental divergence in reality that was highlighted by the recent release of Hugo Vickers' scathing biography, which paints a portrait of a late queen who had grown deeply guarded against her grandson. Someone close to palace circles tells me that the late queen's own distrust, reportedly requiring witnesses for their telephone calls in her final years, has served as a blueprint for William's own ironclad boundaries. The Prince of Wales is not interested in the performative peace offerings or the secret truces that certain media cheerleaders are so fond of peddling to the press. He sees the long-term consequences of a reconciliation as far more damaging than the current estrangement, recognizing that trust, once shattered so publicly, can never truly be glued back together. There is also the matter of the purse strings, which, as any student of history knows, is where the true power of the crown often resides when dealing with wayward relatives who have developed an expensive taste for independence. A well-placed source indicates that William is now taking an exceptionally hard line regarding royal trusts and potential inheritances, viewing any financial support for the Montecito duo as an unacceptable risk to the stability of the institution. The cynicism here is palpable, as the heir to the throne reportedly fears that any royal cash would merely be redirected toward supporting a lifestyle that the British public no longer wishes to subsidize, or worse, funding media ventures that continue to profit from royal proximity. It is basic common sense from his perspective. One cannot spend years publicly savaging the monarchy and then expect to retire on its dividends while living in a California mansion. This move to freeze out his brother financially is not just a personal grudge. It is a calculated, strategic strike designed to ensure that the door back into royal life remains not just closed, but bolted from the inside. William is essentially signaling that the bank is closed, the patience is exhausted, and the inheritance is no longer a birthright for those who have forsaken their duties. As we look toward the upcoming royal wedding of Peter and Harriet, the tension in the air is thick enough to cut with a ceremonial sword. While the family publicly welcomes the distraction of a happy occasion, behind closed doors, there is a desperate maneuvering to avoid the optics of a sibling reunion that would only serve to overshadow the event and provide more fodder for the Sussex sideshow. Someone close to palace circles suggests that the decision to keep the ceremony private was a strategic move to excuse both brothers from attending, thereby avoiding the inevitable strain of a public encounter that would be picked apart by every lip reader in the country. It is a sad state of affairs when a family wedding must be shrunken in scale just to manage the toxicity of one estranged member, yet this is the reality of the no-nonsense era. William is no longer interested in giving his brother a stage upon which to play the victim or the prodigal son. He is focused on the inner emotions of his own young family, protecting Catherine and their children from the surrounding pressure of a narrative that Harry and Meghan seem determined to keep on life support, despite its obvious dilution. One can only imagine the suffocating atmosphere inside the Montecito mansion as the realization sets in that the silence from London is not a tactical pause, but a permanent policy. For a couple that has built an entire brand on being heard, the total lack of a royal response is the ultimate form of disarmament, leaving them to shout into an increasingly indifferent void. A source behind closed doors hints that the frustration in California is reaching a fever pitch, as the global impact they once envisioned has dwindled into a series of secondary media ventures and commercial tie-ins that lack the gravitas of their former status. They are finding that without the constant friction of a royal dispute, their narrative loses its primary engine. A victim needs an oppressor, and William has simply refused to play the role any longer. The long-term consequence of this strategy is the slow but inevitable dilution of the Sussex brand. As the public's appetite for recycled grievances begins to wane in the face of a monarchy that is moving forward with a sense of purpose and renewed discipline. It is a masterclass in institutional preservation, proving that sometimes the most powerful statement a king-in-waiting can make is to say absolutely nothing at all. Inside the palace, the shift is palpable, and a well-meaning staff member describes a sense of clearing the air that has permeated the corridors of power. There is no longer the constant anxiety of a leaked phone call or a bombshell interview appearing in the Sunday papers. Instead, there is a focused, almost military precision to the way William and Catherine are managing their public image and their future. This is the no-nonsense era in action, where the inner circle is smaller, more loyal, and entirely aligned with the goal of protecting the crown's dignity. William's internal monologue, if we are to judge by his actions, is one of duty-bound sacrifice, a recognition that the bond he once shared with his brother was a casualty of a war he did not start, but is determined to finish on his own terms. He understands that every time he engages, he legitimizes a narrative that seeks to undermine his father's reign and his own future, and he has decided that the price of peace is a permanent severance. Even the late Queen's final years, as detailed in the recent Vickers biography, show a woman who had seen through the smoke and mirrors, eventually refusing to even take Harry's calls unless she had a witness to document the exchange. This was a woman who valued loyalty and service above all else, and to see her grandson treat the institution like a bargaining chip must have been a profound betrayal. William has taken that lesson to heart, and someone close to palace circles suggests that his hard line is as much a tribute to his grandmother's memory as it is a protection for his own children's future. He is ensuring that George, Charlotte, and Louis do not inherit a fractured family dynamic that could haunt their own tenures, opting instead for a clean break that establishes a clear precedent for what happens to those who choose to walk away and throw stones from the sidelines. The surrounding pressure of the public eye has only served to solidify his resolve as he sees the overwhelming support for a monarchy that stands firm against internal chaos. The financial aspect cannot be overstated, as it represents the most tangible expression of William's desire for containment and accountability. By strategically moving to block Harry and Meghan from future inheritances and royal cash, he is effectively cutting off the fuel that sustains their transatlantic operation. A well-placed source notes that William sees this not as a punishment, but as a necessary safeguard to prevent the crown's wealth from being used to undermine its own interests or fund a media machine that has been hostile to his family. There's a certain cynical realism in this move, a cold calculation that without the royal guilt, the Sussexes' ventures will eventually have to stand or fall on their own merit, and so far, the results have been less than stellar. The long-term consequences of this financial isolation will be felt for decades, as the Duke of Sussex finds himself increasingly detached from the resources and the influence that once defined his life. It is a stark reminder that in the world of the Windsors, proximity to the throne is the only true currency that matters, and Harry has spent his entire balance. The long-term consequences of this freeze-out are becoming increasingly clear as we move further into 2026, a year that many experts are now calling the point of no return for the royal brothers. Harry appears to have underestimated the sheer durability of the institution he thought he could reinvent from a distance, and the realization must be a bitter pill to swallow as his global influence begins to dilate. While he may have been motivated by a desire for personal agency, he is finding that the global media mogul persona has a far shorter shelf life than a 1,000-year-old title. From William's viewpoint, the ball isn't just in his court. He has taken the ball and left the stadium entirely, refusing to engage in a game where the rules are constantly being rewritten by a couple in California. The internal monologue of a future king is no longer plagued by what-ifs or the hope for a brotherly reconciliation. It is focused entirely on the grim, necessary work of ensuring that when he eventually takes the throne, there are no loose threads left to pull. As we conclude this first look at the final freeze-out, it is clear that we are witnessing the end of an era and the beginning of a far more rigid future. The days of negotiation, of peace talks, and of hoped-for reconciliations are over, replaced by a strategic, clinical exclusion that is as final as it is necessary for the survival of the firm. Prince William has made his choice, and he has made it with the future of the British monarchy in mind, leaving his brother to navigate a world that is becoming increasingly indifferent to his plight. Harry is no longer a brother to be rescued, but a figure from the past whose relevance is fading with every passing day of the no-nonsense era. The path forward for the crown is clear, and it does not include a seat at the table for those who have proven they cannot be trusted with the family secrets. This is the reality of the situation, cold, unvarnished, and entirely irreversible. Before we continue, take a second to subscribe. These videos don't always get recommended, and this way you won't miss the next one. The reclassification of Prince Harry from a beloved, if wayward, younger brother to a permanent institutional burden is perhaps the most significant shift we have witnessed within the House of Windsor this decade. A source within the inner circle recently noted that while King Charles may still occasionally lead with his heart, evidenced by those brief, much-publicized tea meetings at Clarence House, Prince William is operating purely on a level of cold clinical strategy. To the Prince of Wales, Harry is no longer a family member in need of a rescue mission, but a tactical problem that must be actively contained to prevent further damage to the monarchy's foundations. This ruthless streak that the papers are so fond of mentioning is not a character flaw, but a necessary survival mechanism for a future king who sees the very survival of the crown as being under unprecedented pressure. There is a sense that the era of second chances has reached its natural conclusion, and William is simply acting accordingly, recognizing that one cannot maintain a stable institution while constantly placating an unpredictable element in California. This strategy of structural containment has recently extended into the realm of high-stakes finance, where the Prince of Wales has reportedly taken a very firm hand. A well-placed source suggests that William moved decisively to block what was described as a $37 million escape plan or exit strategy linked to Meghan Markle, which involved a complex restructuring of assets designed to bypass traditional royal oversight. From the palace's perspective, this wasn't an act of personal retaliation, but a preemptive safeguard to ensure that royal resources and titles aren't being leveraged for private commercial gain that could later embarrass the crown. The message being sent is unmistakable. Independence comes with a price, and that price is a total lack of access to the institutional safety net that Harry once took for granted. It is a cynical, yet entirely practical realization that without such firm boundaries, the Sussexes' financial maneuvers could create a permanent reputational liability for the next generation of working royals. The internal tension reached a boiling point following Harry's fleeting visits to the UK, which left William feeling utterly bewildered and frustrated. Someone close to palace circles tells me that the heir to the throne was particularly incensed by the optics of his father, apparently forgiving years of public betrayal after just an hour of conversation. To William, this looks like letting the fox back into the henhouse, and he is reportedly so disillusioned with the situation that he has reached a point where he doesn't even want to hear his brother's name mentioned in his presence. There is a profound sense of betrayal here. William feels that the misery Harry has inflicted on the family over the last few years cannot simply be erased by a single meeting or performative olive branch. His desire for Harry to remain permanently in America is not just about physical distance, but about a total emotional and institutional severance that ensures the fox can no longer threaten the stability of the inner sanctum. The broader world is also beginning to reflect this hardening of sentiment as the novelty of the Sussexes' truth-telling appears to have finally curdled into public indifference. A longtime family acquaintance has pointed out that the Duke of Sussex may have significantly bit off more than he could chew when he attempted to reinvent himself as a global media mogul alongside an American actress. The reality of 2026 is a series of lackluster projects and reports that even major platforms like Netflix are finally done with the couple after their narrative failed to sustain long-term interest. We are seeing a couple who once thought they could command the global stage now reduced to arguing over rumors of office dynamics and petty grievances in Hollywood trade Bibles. This diminishing relevance is precisely what the palace's containment strategy predicted, that once the royal connection is truly severed, the commercial appeal of the exiled royals would eventually collapse under the weight of its own repetition. Behind closed doors, the exhaustion among the staff and the family members who remain in the trenches is palpable. A well-meaning staff member describes a feeling of relief that the boundaries are finally being enforced, as it allows the rest of the family to focus on their actual duties without the constant shadow of a potential bombshell from Montecito. While the public might see a family in turmoil, the insiders see a monarchy that is finally cleaning house and prioritizing its own survival over the whims of its most troublesome members. William knows that he is not trying to be the most liked member of the family, but the most effective protector of its future. And if that requires being labeled as ruthless, then it is a title he seems more than willing to wear. The long-term consequence for Harry is a slow descent into obscurity, a fate that for a man born into the heart of the British monarchy must be the most painful containment of all. Would you like me to proceed with writing part 3 of the script? The enforcement of this royal hard line is not merely a series of cold shoulderings at public events. It has become a systematic institutional dismantling of Prince Harry's remaining ties to the firm. We are seeing the anatomy of the exclusion play out in real time, where every potential avenue for a return or even a temporary reconciliation is being systematically bricked up by the Prince of Wales. A well-placed source suggests that William's strategy is less about a personal vendetta and more about a clinical de-risking of the monarchy. From his perspective, every interaction with the Sussexes carries an unacceptable level of institutional peril, leading to the reported implementation of strict internal protocols. Some in the inner circle are even referring to these as Memo 2485 or the W17 Order. These aren't just administrative updates. They are the ironclad rules of the no-nonsense era, ensuring that no staff member, official, or family member provides the oxygen of information that Harry and Meghan so desperately crave for their media ventures. The financial bolting of the door is perhaps the most visible layer of this new reality, as William reportedly moves to ensure that the Bank of King Charles remains firmly closed to those who have abandoned their posts. Someone close to palace circles indicates that the Prince of Wales has been a driving force in reviewing royal trusts and future inheritance plans, specifically seeking to freeze access to significant sums, such as a rumored $14 million inheritance. This is basic common sense for a future king who sees the absurdity of a multi-million-dollar lifestyle in California being underwritten by the very institution it seeks to criticize. A source behind closed doors even hints that Williams successfully blocked a complex $37 million escape plan that was allegedly being prepared as a final financial handshake for the couple. The inner emotions driving these decisions are a complex mix of deep sadness over a lost brotherhood and an unyielding commitment to the business of the crown, a burden William carries with a growing sense of strategic necessity. As we look toward the Sussexes' planned visit to the United Kingdom in July 2026 for the Invictus Games, the atmosphere is already being managed with military precision to ensure total containment. A well-meaning staff member confirms that there are absolutely no plans for a private reunion between the brothers, with any potential contact strictly limited to the most formal of official engagements. The surrounding pressure of the public eye means that the palace is leaving nothing to chance. They are effectively treating this as a visit from a foreign celebrity rather than a returning family member. This strategy of structural containment ensures that the Sussexes cannot use the trip to manufacture royal content for their struggling media deals. The long-term consequence is a permanent shift where the Duke and Duchess find themselves as mere spectators to a monarchy that is moving forward without them, a reality that is likely to be a bitter pill for a couple so accustomed to being at the center of the narrative. Within the palace, there is a palpable sense of relief that a clear line has finally been drawn, allowing the working royals to focus on their duties without the constant threat of internal sabotage. A source within the inner circle describes a new culture of discipline and loyalty, where the turning point in William's relationship with his father has created a united front that Harry simply cannot penetrate. William's internal monologue is now focused on the future, specifically on raising George, Charlotte, and Louis in an environment defined by honesty and unity, a direct contrast to the destructive family wars of his own childhood. He is fiercely protective of his children's privacy and their perception of the monarchy, ensuring they are not anxious about unanswered questions regarding their estranged uncle. This isn't just about the current rift. It is about establishing a legacy of stability for the next generation, proving that the crown is a responsibility that requires absolute loyalty, not a platform for personal grievances. The long-term consequences of this anatomy of exclusion will be felt for decades as the Duke of Sussex becomes a cautionary tale rather than a revolutionary figure. By prioritizing the business of the monarchy over the emotions of the family, William is securing the institution's future in an increasingly skeptical world. The door isn't just closed, it has been architecturally redesigned out of the building. A longtime family acquaintance notes that while Harry may have thought he was escaping to freedom, he has instead found himself in a gilded cage of his own making, stripped of the only currency, royal access, that made his brand valuable. Meanwhile, the no-nonsense era in London continues unabated, with a future king who has learned that the most effective way to handle a problem is to simply remove it from the equation entirely. Would you like me to proceed with Part 4? The atmosphere within the Montecito estate is reportedly shifting from one of defiant independence to a palpable, frantic energy, as the reality of William's impenetrable silence finally begins to starve the Sussex machine of its essential fuel. A source behind closed doors hints at a growing sense of panic within the couple's inner sanctum as they realize that without the friction of a royal back and forth, their narrative of victimhood is rapidly losing its commercial pulse. We are seeing a couple who once believed they could dictate terms to a 1,000-year-old institution now reduced to a series of secondary media ventures that appear increasingly hollow in the face of the palace's dignified, powerful silence. While Prince William remains focused on the no-nonsense era of his own leadership, Harry and Meghan are left shouting into an echo chamber that is growing quieter by the day. The long-term consequence of this tactical starvation is a brand that is diluting before our eyes, struggling to find relevance when the oppressor they so frequently reference simply refuses to acknowledge their existence. The shifting narrative in California has recently centered on a desperate rebrand, with American Riviera Orchard being quietly retired in favor of the more lifestyle-focused As Ever, a move that some close to palace circles view as a final, grasping attempt to salvage their commercial viability. However, even this pivot has been marred by failure, as reports surface that the partnership between As Ever and Netflix officially collapsed in early March 2026, leaving the couple without a major streaming anchor for their increasingly fragmented projects. Someone close to palace circles suggests that the exhaustion felt by Hollywood executives mirrors that of the royal family, as the couple repeatedly fails to deliver content of real substance beyond their own grievances. This echo chamber in exile is becoming a lonely place, where the initial $100 million promises have dwindled into cautionary tales of grifting and missed opportunities. The internal monologue for the Sussexes must be one of intense frustration as they watch their influence evaporate, while William's refusal to engage acts as a permanent ceiling on their ability to generate fresh interest. The surrounding pressure is only set to increase with the release of Hugo Vickers' scathing new biography, which offers a chilling look at the late Queen's final years and her profound distrust of the Duke. A well-placed source notes that the revelation that Elizabeth II eventually refused to speak with Harry without a witness present has sent shockwaves through the Montecito camp as it dismantles the narrative of a special, untouchable bond they have long promoted. This historical record acts as a powerful endorsement of William's current stonewalling strategy, suggesting that the freeze-out is not just a brotherly spat, but a continuation of a policy established by the monarch herself. For Harry, being portrayed by a veteran historian as someone who simply bit off more than he could chew is a devastating blow to his image as a revolutionary figure. The cynical reality is that while they attempt to maintain a glossy, high-production life in exile, the weight of their own history and the growing consensus of their unreliability are becoming an inescapable burden. As the couple prepares for their much-publicized revenge trip to Australia this April, there is an unmistakable air of desperation behind the smiles and the philanthropic engagements. A source within the inner circle suggests that this visit is a transparent attempt to recapture the magic of their 2018 tour, yet it risks backfiring spectacularly by overshadowing major milestones for the working royals back in the UK. While they hope to silence their critics with a display of global popularity, the long-term consequence of such rogue royal tours is a further hardening of William's resolve to strip them of any remaining official status. Someone close to Palace circles hints that William is already contemplating the dynamite move of stripping titles in retaliation for the ongoing media circus, viewing these international forays as an unacceptable challenge to the king's authority. The atmosphere in London is one of cold anticipation, waiting to see if this latest gamble in the Southern Hemisphere will be the final misstep that forces a permanent legal rupture. Ultimately, the Sussexes find themselves trapped in a cycle of their own making, where every attempt to stay relevant only serves to highlight the vast distance between their reality and the institutional power they left behind. Prince William's masterclass in silence has effectively rendered their truth obsolete, as there is no longer a conversation for them to participate in. The long-term consequence of this fraternal severance is a monarchy that is becoming more streamlined and disciplined, while the exiled Duke and Duchess are left to navigate a world that is becoming increasingly indifferent to their plight. It is a stark contrast: a future king securing his legacy through quiet duty, and a former prince struggling to define himself in an echo chamber of his own design. The reality of 2026 is that the royal family has moved on, and in doing so, they have left Harry and Meghan with the one thing they seem least equipped to handle: an absolute lack of attention. The historical gravity of this moment cannot be overstated as we witness Prince William navigate the profound, often chilling isolation that inevitably comes with the weight of the crown. A well-placed source suggests that the Prince of Wales has privately accepted that the preservation of the monarchy requires a sacrifice far more personal than many of his predecessors ever had to endure. He is no longer acting out of the heat of a sibling quarrel, but with the cold, measured focus of a future king who understands that discipline and loyalty are the only currencies that matter in the long run. By choosing the institution over his own blood, Prince William is effectively cementing his legacy as a protector of the realm years before his own coronation, proving that the no-nonsense era is a fundamental shift in how the Windsors will operate going forward. This transition from viewing Prince Harry as a brother to be rescued to a problem to be contained is a final verdict that reflects the surrounding pressure to maintain the dignity of the throne at all costs. It is a somber realization for the public, yet it signals a monarch in waiting who is prepared to be as ruthless as history demands, realizing that a king cannot rule a house divided by perpetual betrayal. The atmosphere within the palace now is one of hard-won quiet security, a palpable sense that the internal upheaval has finally been excised to make room for a more streamlined and resilient firm. Someone close to palace circles observes that the exhaustion of the last few years has finally given way to a renewed sense of purpose, as the working royals, led by Prince William and Catherine, find their stride without the constant, draining distraction of the Sussex circus. The long-term consequences of this severance are becoming clear. A monarchy that is more unified, less vulnerable to public tantrums, and entirely focused on service rather than the fleeting glitter of celebrity. For Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, the skeptical language once reserved for the tabloids has now become the standard tone within the inner circle, reflecting a public sentiment that has largely moved on from their endless grievances and shifting narratives. It is a cynical reality for the couple in California, but as the door back into royal life closes for good, the institution they thought they could reinvent remains as immovable as the stones of Windsor itself. This absolute exclusion is the only way to ensure that the next generation inherits a crown that is not perpetually besieged by those who have forsaken their duty for a life of commercialized victimhood. As we reflect on this historic fracture, we must recognize the sheer weight of a future king, deciding that some wounds are simply too deep to be healed for the sake of the monarchy's survival. Prince William may have stopped arguing with Prince Harry because he has already looked ahead and decided that the outcome must be final, ensuring that his reign is defined by its strength rather than its scandals. This unvarnished look at the internal mechanics of the family reveals a man who has matured into the role of a sovereign long before the crown touches his head, sacrificing his own peace for the stability of the nation. It is a quiet, powerful statement that the survival of the firm will always outweigh individual desires or the whims of those who seek to profit from their proximity to the throne. The surrounding atmosphere of the palace is now one of a secured future, where the rules of engagement have been rewritten to exclude those who do not respect the sanctity of the institution and its secrets. We are watching the closing of a chapter that was once defined by hope, but has ended in a necessary clinical silence that marks the true beginning of the William era. The gravity of this situation is final, and the consequences will ripple through the annals of history as a moment where the duty of the crown triumphed over the pull of the heart. Leave your thoughts below. I read every word you write, and if you value this unvarnished look at the monarchy, do ensure you are subscribed and share this with those who appreciate the truth.